As per the report, the company quickly moved inventory from manufacturing centers in India and China to the US.
Apple reportedly chartered cargo flights to ferry 600 tons of iPhones to the US from its manufacturing plants in India.
Apple just airlifted over 600 tons of iPhones from India to the US, all to dodge the brutal 145% tariffs Trump slapped on Chinese imports. That's not a typo. 600 tons. This move wasn't about innovation. It was pure survival. Why? Because Trump's trade war didn't just target China, it forced Apple to rewrite its entire global strategy. And the consequences? We're looking at the collapse of China's manufacturing dominance, the rise of India, and a potential $100 billion supply chain shock across the tech world. If you follow the real battles behind your phone's price tag, hit that subscribe button. We break down strategy, not gossip. This isn't just about one company. It's a power play reshaping Asia's tech map. Let's count down the top 5 moves that forced Apple's exodus and why the number 1 twist could shake Silicon Valley to its core. Number 5, Trump slams China with 145% tech tariffs. Apple gets crushed. In 2020, Trump didn't just launch a trade war. He detonated a financial bomb on the tech world. The moment he announced up to 145% tariffs on Chinese electronics, Apple was the first to bleed. iPhones assembled in Shenzhen were no longer profitable. Just the tariff alone could jack up retail prices by $200 per unit. Multiply that by 100 million iPhones shipped to the US every year, and Apple faced an instant $20 billion black hole. What's worse? The tariffs hit during peak product cycles. Apple's margins were already razor-thin, and Wall Street panicked. Within 30 days, Apple lost over $700 billion in market cap, wiping out years of stock growth. Investors blamed one thing: Apple's dangerous dependence on China. Trump didn't name Apple, but his policies hit them harder than any tweet ever could. And while Apple lobbied hard for exemptions, the message was clear: get out of China or pay the price. Tim Cook had 2 options: absorb the cost and kill profits, or reroute the supply chain. That's when India entered the chat. Apple's internal memos leaked in 2021 revealed they were fast-tracking a 3-year exit plan from China, starting with lower-tier iPhones and moving upward. But the shift wouldn't be easy. China still controlled over 70% of Apple's component supply. And trust me, things only got uglier from here. Number 4, Apple ships 600 tons of iPhones out of India by plane. In a move straight out of a wartime logistics manual, Apple didn't wait for sea freight or bureaucratic delays. They airlifted 600 tons of iPhones, yes, by air, from India directly to the US. Why? Because the longer those phones stayed in Asia, the more money Apple bled from Trump's tariffs. That's roughly 1.5 million iPhones loaded onto multiple chartered cargo flights, bypassing Chinese ports entirely. The cost? Over $50 million in emergency shipping fees, but compared to the $200 million they'd pay in tariffs, it was a no-brainer. This wasn't a test run. It was the first real signal that Apple was executing a total manufacturing pivot, and India wasn't just a backup plan, it was the new frontline. And India delivered. Factories in Tamil Nadu and Karnataka scaled up output by over 60% in under 6 months, with Foxconn and Wistron leading the charge. Indian labor costs? 25 to 30% lower than China, and with 0 tariff penalties, Apple's math suddenly made sense. But here's the twist. Despite the successful shipment, over 40% of the components inside those Indian-assembled iPhones still came from China. The shell moved, the core didn't. Apple was racing against time, and Beijing knew it. Chinese suppliers started tightening terms, slowing shipments, and playing hardball. This wasn't just trade friction anymore, it was a cold economic war. And that war was about to hit full scale in the next phase. Number 3. Apple bets big, 60 million iPhones a year from India. Apple wasn't just testing the waters with a few planes of iPhones. By late 2023, Tim Cook went all in. Apple would produce 60 million iPhones annually in India by 2026. That's nearly half of its global iPhone output. A $40 billion gamble on a country with weaker infrastructure but massive political leverage. To pull this off, Apple had to rewire its supply chain at lightning speed. New deals were signed with Tata Group, while Foxconn poured $1.6 billion into expanding its Indian facilities. Over 100,000 jobs were projected, and Modi's government fast-tracked clearances, land leases, and tax breaks. But the speed came with cracks. India lacked China's hyper-efficient ecosystem, no instant supply parks, fewer local component makers, and labor protests started to bubble. Still, Apple was under pressure to deliver. Here's the kicker. Internal documents showed Apple's target wasn't just India, it was de-risking Trump exposure. They feared Trump's return to the White House would bring even harsher tariffs, or worse, restrictions on using Chinese contractors at all. And while investors cheered the diversification, there was one inconvenient truth. China still made Apple's most advanced components, chips, sensors, camera modules, the real guts of the iPhone. So while India was building shells, China still owned the brain. Apple was halfway out of the fire, but the next phase would prove if it was truly free or just shifting cages. Number 2. China still holds the iPhone's brain, and Apple can't escape. While Apple proudly flaunted its new Made in India labels, the truth behind the curtain was far less independent. Over 60% of every iPhone's core components, from A-series chips to OLED displays and LiDAR sensors, still came straight out of China. Even Apple's most secure suppliers, like TSMC, relied on Chinese subcontractors for finishing, testing, and materials. In other words, India was assembling shells, but Beijing still owned the iPhone's brain. And China knew it. After Apple's shift to India went public, Beijing began quietly tightening the screws. Key suppliers like Luxshare and BOE faced sudden delays, inspections, and technical reevaluations. It wasn't sabotage, it was a warning. Apple couldn't move fast enough. Their dream of a China-free iPhone hit hard walls. Vietnam couldn't scale, Taiwan was geopolitically risky, and India still lacked high-precision fabs. Here's where it gets strategic. The Chinese Communist Party began pushing Huawei's domestic phone production, cutting Apple's local market share by over 20% in just 12 months. A retaliatory strike, disguised as competition. And Apple? Stuck in limbo. Too reliant on China to walk away, too exposed to Trump-era tariffs to stay comfortable. Tim Cook faced a chilling realization. Apple had escaped the tariff fire, but only by stepping into a geopolitical minefield. And that brings us to the most dangerous twist of all. Number 1, India emerges as the new tech battlefield backed by Trump's shadow. While Apple fought tariff fires and supplier chokeholds, another shift was quietly taking shape, and this one changes everything. India isn't just a backup. It's becoming the center of gravity for the next tech war, and here's the twist. It's partially engineered by Trump himself. Trump's tariffs weren't random punishment. They were designed to redirect Western capital out of China, and India was the prime beneficiary. By 2024, over $80 billion in U.S. tech investments had flowed into India, including Apple, Google, Amazon, and Microsoft. Even Tesla announced plans for an Indian EV factory. Modi's administration capitalized fast, cutting taxes, easing regulations, and pledging $10 billion in subsidies for chip manufacturing. The goal? Make India the next Silicon Valley, minus the Communist Party strings. Apple's long-term strategy is now fully entangled in India's rise. The company plans to build a new iPhone design center in Bangalore, hire over 50,000 engineers, and shift more than 50% of all U.S.-bound production to Indian soil by 2026. But the bigger story? India's alignment with U.S. economic interests, especially if Trump returns. Washington sees India not just as a partner, but as a wedge to crush China's tech hold. This isn't just about smartphones anymore. It's about control over the 21st century supply chain, and Apple, whether it wants to or not, just became the centerpiece of that global game. Final thoughts. Apple's shift from China to India isn't just a supply chain adjustment. It's a $100 billion realignment of global tech power. Triggered by Trump's aggressive tariffs, the move has exposed Apple's vulnerability, China's grip, and India's sudden rise as a strategic manufacturing giant. But this transition is more than economic. It signals a Cold War in technology where production lines double as political alliances. And in that war, Apple isn't neutral. It's a pawn, a player, and possibly the battlefield itself. If Trump returns, expect tariffs to tighten, supply chains to harden, and Apple to move faster toward Indian soil or suffer the consequences. Want more deep dives like this? Drop a comment below, let me know what twist shocked you most, and subscribe if you want to follow the money, the power, and the strategies shaping tomorrow. This isn't over. It's just the opening shot.